now let's take a look at when you might need to head out of Lightroom and into Photoshop. Lightroom is only capable of so much. And if you want to do something like add a border around your picture, maybe apply some texture to it, and sign your name in the lower right corner. Well, if you look in Lightroom, you just won't find any features for that. And that's because Lightroom is not going to modify your original file. It stays there completely unchanged. And it only writes down what you've done to the image. There's only so much you can do, and that's the way you're thinking. But Photoshop, on the other hand, can do just about anything. And in the process of doing so, it does change your file. And so I want to show you how you can take your images from Lightroom, send them over to Photoshop, make some changes, and get the results to show back up in Lightroom again. And the whole process, just how to make it work nicely. Here's an image where I would like to remove some people. It's a common task. You went to a touristy location, and what do you expect? Tourists. So Lightroom has some retouching tools, but they're mainly designed for getting rid of little specks in the sky in your image, or overly simple retouching, because Lightroom is going to try to not change the original file and just kind of keep track of what you did with it in a way that's easily undoable. Photoshop, on the other hand, has a multitude of adjustment tools and retouching tools, and we might need it for an image like this. So to edit this in Photoshop, I'm going to go to the Photo menu. I'm going to choose Edit In, and that's where I find Edit in Photoshop. When I choose that, it's going to send the file directly over to Photoshop. Then, to do the retouching, I'm going to use a tool on the left side of my screen that's called the Spot Healing Brush. And with that tool, I'm just going to paint on top of the people. And when I let go, it should remove them. And I'll just have to paint over each one individually. We'll say that we're done for now. To get this back into Lightroom, I'm just going to go to the File menu and choose Save. It doesn't ask me for any options, and I can just close the file. Now I head over to Lightroom, and I see the end result. But it didn't just keep the end result. If I go back and look at the thumbnails that are in here, you'll see actually two files. One of those files is the original. It still has the people in it, and the other is the end result we made in Photoshop. Now, the reason you get two files is Lightroom is making all of its changes by just writing down some text about what you've done to brighten or darken the picture. Photoshop, on the other hand, actually changed what makes up the image. And because of that, it couldn't just save it as some notes. It had to save over the original image, and that's how it usually worked. But Lightroom said, hey, no way, we're going to keep the original. And that's just so you can always get back to the absolute pristine original. You don't have to keep both files. Just click on the original if you'd like, hit delete, and you can say delete from disk, and you'd only have one image. But I usually keep them both. That way I can get back to the original or the stuff that I made in Photoshop. It'll even stack them here in Lightroom, where you see a number in the upper left corner. If you click on the number, it will hide the original, slide it underneath this version that was made in Lightroom. Click that number again, and it expands it so I can see them both. If I want to make additional changes, I click on that image again, choose Photo. Delete from disk, and you'd only have one image. But I usually keep them both. That way I can get back to the original or the stuff that I made in Photoshop. It'll even stack them here in Lightroom, where you see a number in the upper left corner. If you click on the number, it will hide the original, slide it underneath this version that was made in Lightroom. Click that number again, and it expands it so I can see them both. If I want to make additional changes, I click on that image again, choose Photo, Edit In, and the same choice we had before to send it to Photoshop. But this time it recognizes that it's not the original that came from my digital camera. Instead, it's a file made in Photoshop, and so it asks me some options. I always choose the bottom option and just click Edit. I'll be right back into Photoshop. It'll look exactly the same as it did last time I was there. And then only when I'm completely done working in Photoshop would I think about adjusting the image using Lightroom. And if that's the way you work, life will be simple. So now you see how to easily take an image from Lightroom, send it to Photoshop, and get the results to show back up in Lightroom again. And you can go to Photoshop as many times as you'd like. The process is easy as long as you use what we've shown you. So I have an image I want to share with friends, but the changes I've made in Lightroom didn't affect the original file. So I'm going to need to export a copy and give that to a friend. let's look at how to export and how to print. My original file didn't look like this. I made it this nice using Lightroom. If I share my original image with someone else, they're not going to see these changes. In order to get someone to see these, I need to export my image. And to do that, I go to the File menu and I have a bunch of choices for exporting. Then usually you'd have to go to Export to actually get to the settings you want to use. And so let's take a look in there. In here you'll find there's a multitude of settings. We'll just look at a few of them for now. Here you can tell it what folder you would like to export to, and I currently have it set to export to my desktop. Clicking the Choose button on the right side would allow you to choose an alternative. There are a bunch of other settings you can set in here. Most of them are optional though, so let's just look at the important ones. If you want to rename the files, you could do that here, but I find the original names are usually fine. If I want to rename something, I often do it afterwards. If you come down to File Settings, here's where you choose the file format you use. JPEG is the most popular, but some people will be asked for other formats, so you have them available here. Then we have image sizing, and this is where you mainly control how large of a picture you're going to give people, because your digital camera probably captured a pretty big image. And if you just want to email it to a friend to do a casual sharing, you probably don't need to send them a full-size image. So let's type in maybe 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. To get it to just be an acceptable size that's not huge. And then we can come in here and make sure it's sharpened so it looks good on somebody's screen. But most of the other settings are optional. And then instead of hitting the export button, which would export this one file, I'm going to go to the left side of my screen where I find an Add button. If I click Add, I'm going to save this as a preset. And I'm just going to create a name that reminds me of the settings I'm using. Maybe I put in the width the image will be, like 1,000 pixels, and I put the file format, and then where it's going to be saved. And I tell it where to put this. You can organize them into folders. I'll put it in User Presets, and I'm going to hit Create. That's going to make a preset so that I never have to return to this screen where you see all the settings. Instead, all of these settings are incorporated into that preset. In fact, I know I'm going to have to export images in the future at different sizes, so I might as well right now come in here and make another preset, maybe one for 2,000 pixels wide. And just hit the Add button on the left side and give that one a name. And I might end up creating 4, 5, or 6 presets depending on how many different sizes I typically need to save. At this point, it might feel a little odd, but I'm not going to click the Export button. And that's because I don't right now want to export this individual file. I just wanted to create the presets we've made. Instead, I'll click Cancel. And now at any time, I can select a single image, or I could select 1,000 images and go to the File menu. I can choose Export with Preset, and I'll find my presets right down here. When I choose one of the presets, it's going to instantly start exporting that file. And I'll see a progress bar in the upper left. Once that progress bar is done, it means the files are ready. And in this case, I exported it to my desktop, so I know there's a 1,000 pixel wide JPEG file sitting there ready for me to email or share with anyone. So now let's move on to printing and see how we can use the same ideas where we use templates and presets to simplify the way we work. So to print, in the upper right, you click on Print to get to the Print module. In Print, just like with Export, there are all sorts of settings you can use. And that's because Lightroom wants to be as versatile as possible there, but at the same time, it wants you to be able to make it simple by making templates and presets. So on the left side of my screen, if I click, here we have the Template browser. And if I mouse over each one of these choices without clicking, I'll see a preview above. When I click on one of them, then the image on the right should change to show what it would look like with the picture I'm currently working on. If I find that one of these templates is close to what I want, but not exactly, then that's when I move to the right side of my screen and I modify the settings. And in this case, I might want to modify the layout a little bit. I'd like to make it so the left and the right side are a little bit more even, and that this side over here has more white space. So I'm going to go over here where it says Margins. And first I'll get all these numbers to be equal, so we have an equal amount. You can either move the slider or there are numbers over here. You can click on and type in a specific setting. Then I wanted more space on this side. Well, that's the right side of the sheet of paper. Might be the bottom of the picture, but it's the right side of the paper. And that's exactly what I wanted. So once I've modified that, I go to the left side of my screen again where we have the template browser. You see the plus sign. I'm going to create a brand new template. And just like when we were using export presets, here we can organize them into various folders. I'll put mine in a folder called User Templates. And I'll just give this a name. I'll call it White Border, Large Bottom. Click Create, and now if I look at the template browser and scroll all the way down, I should find the preset I've just made here under User Templates. So in the future, I browse my templates to see if there's anything close to what I like, click on it when I find it, and then on the right side of my screen, only modify the settings that I need. When I'm done, save a new template. And over time, you'll find that you have a nice list of all the templates you need, so you rarely need to look at the settings that actually make them up. So as you can see, Lightroom has a multitude of settings for exporting and printing. But you can simplify your life by creating presets. And then instead of looking at all the settings, you look at your presets. When you need to deviate from them, click on the preset that's closest to what you need, and then only change the settings that you need to have different. If that's something you're going to use again in the future, save a new preset. And over time, you'll find that you rely more on presets and look less at settings.